Welcome, everybody. This session will be in English. However, if you have any questions for the author, you can post them in the comments in English as well as in German, and we will translate for you. Our next guest is Jenn Lyons, author of the epic fantasy series A Chorus of Dragons. While the second book of this series, The Name of All Things, or in German, Der Name aller Dinge, has just been released in German, book 4 is already available in English. So for the German fans, there's more to come. And by the way, Jenn is not only a writer, she's also a video game producer and, as I heard, a great cook and. So there will be a lot to talk about. Hello and welcome, Jenn Lyons.
Hi, it is such a pleasure to be here.
Hello, Jenn. Can you see hear me? You?
Oh no. Can you not hear me? Let's try that again. Can you not hear me?
Aber ich höre sie nicht. Must be my computer. Welcome everybody, Tom, my great technic guy.
We'll get this sorted in just a minute. There's always something, right? I know she can't hear me.
No, I still don't hear you. I don't know what went wrong in the meantime between talking now and then. Can you say something again?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I still don't hear you.
Sure. Just trying to see. I mean, yeah, I don't think it's on my end.
Zweifelsfall musst mir deine geben.
There's always something. Like we were literally just talking.
Wieso? Ich kann doch alles hier machen. We are trying to solve that. I'm very sorry. Wieso ist der nicht drin?
Yeah, I could read.
Sprecher.
Oh man.
I'm very sorry, Jenn.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. All right.
Der hier.
So while they're sorting out, and so that I can help with the sound quality and seeing if stuff is happening, I'm just gonna talk. I guess we'll start off with I was indeed I used to be a video game producer. I'm currently a full-time writer, which is a wonderful thing that I never expected to see happen. But I worked at a couple of different indie studios. I worked at I've worked around at a couple of different places. I got my start, although not as a producer, but my entry was with EA, working on a couple of AAA titles there. And prior to that, I was a graphic artist and illustrator and art director for about 20 years before I decided to make the switch and go into video games. So there is a trend, at least they've always been creative endeavors. And yeah, I suppose you could say that video game production isn't creative, but it's being mothered to a team of creative people. So I think it counts.
Just to quickly interrupt you, I now can hear you.
You can hear me, yes. All right.
Hello, Jenn. I'm very sorry. You should never try something new in the last 5 minutes. That never works.
Well, we could hear each other. That was the thing, is like just a few minutes beforehand, and we were hearing each other fine. So
so thank you for starting without me. You
no problem
already
at all.
did a great job. And I just heard you talked a little bit about being a video producer and how that helped you to create worlds. If you want to go on, please do, because that sounded very interesting.
Well, I mean, you know, it was, it is funny that it does sneak into the writing occasionally. You know, there's definitely a chapter in the first book that I think anybody who knows me and knows that I have this background in video games would look at and go, yeah, right there. Yeah, that's the one. Because it's pretty much just purely pulled from a video game kind of idea, you know, where somebody is using illusions to train someone else and just kind of keeps looping them through. It literally, you know, it's a die, okay, restart, die, restart, die, restart. That feels very video game-esque, but you know, the opportunity came up. Who was I to resist putting that into a book? You know, my world building though for this kind of predates my involvement in video games. That comes from being very, very into tabletop role-playing games since I was a child. So, you know, this world started out as a Dungeons and Dragons world, and I filed off the serial numbers a little bit, but you can still see it if you're paying attention. But you know, that was the thing, right? You would create these incredibly intricate worlds for playing with your friends on the weekends. And then when I decided I was going to write a fantasy book, it just seemed very natural to use that as the setting.
I can imagine, yeah. So, Chorus of Dragon, it's a rather complex story, a big story. I think it's 5 books. It will be 5 books all in all.
5 books.
So for those maybe who didn't get to read all of the books, or you're working on book 5 at the moment, or who didn't start the story yet, can you explain a little bit what's going on there? What's the plot? What's the story? Like, of course, don't spoil too much.
Well, it was really, you know, I have grown up loving fantasy and reading everything I could get my hands on. And there's certain themes that, you know, you see repeated again and again and again in these books. And one of them was this idea of the chosen one. And so I really wanted to write something that kind of took that idea and turned it upside down a little bit. So, you know, you have this, you know, the main character of these stories is this, you know, he starts off as a, you know, street urchin kind of character who has, you know, who is pursuing less than legal means of of fundraising to support him and his father. And, you know, like a lot of orphans, he just sort of has this fantasy that one day he will find out that he is the long lost, you know, scion, long lost prince of one of the royal houses that rule the empire. And this happens. It's not actually a fantasy. He finds out he is in fact one of these. But the problem is, of course, is that it turns out the royal families are all horrible, and being shoved into one of these groups is not, you know, it's not a good thing. It's not fun. It's not to his benefit. It's in fact worse than the situation he was in. And he finds himself in the middle of this set of prophecies that say that he's going to destroy the empire and possibly the world. And you know, this is where he keeps his stuff. It's where all his friends are. So he doesn't really want to destroy the empire or the world. So what do you do when, you know, the quote unquote hand of fate says that you have to do this thing when you don't want to do this thing? And that's kind of where the whole thing started from, and the basic idea behind it. Yeah.
And you worked on that very, very long, is that right? Or from the idea to the books, that wasn't like a year or two?
No, well, I mean, the world building, the background setting, that was something that's been on and on for about 25 years. And then I think the first version of the book I wrote early, I mean, you know, towards the beginning of that process. And then I put it away for a long time because it wasn't very good. And then about, I guess at this point, it's been about 5 years. About 5 years ago, I pulled it out and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna rewrite it. And when I did that, that's what became The Ruin of Kings. So that was, I'm still blown away that first book only came out 2 years ago in 2019. It just, yeah, the time has flown by. And then, yeah, I'm right now I'm working on the final revisions for book 5. So
do you know when it will be released in the US already?
Yeah, book 5 is going to be released in April of next year.
Great.
Yeah.
Did you, when you started the story, did you know already how it would end? Did you have the whole story in mind, or
Yeah, I did. They, you know, funny. It turns out that Tor, who's the American publisher, wanted to make sure that I actually had a plan for how to end this. You know, that was very important to them, understandably. So yeah, no, they were like, so you do have like a series summary, right, where you break down what's going to happen through the whole thing. I'm like, oh yeah, of course I do. Go write that up real quick. But and of course it has changed. You know, I think I laugh about it because I wrote this whole thing out, this whole breakdown, and almost immediately in a conversation with my editor, she said, well, we think you should do this. And I'm like, oh, that completely invalidates everything that I talked about. But she was right. So it's fine. The ending, though, hasn't changed. I'm still aiming towards that same ending.
So that was from the beginning, you knew this is where I want to go in the end, but I don't know exactly the way there.
Right. Yeah, the path getting there has shifted around a little bit as we've gone.
And you have, of course, I mean, you come from role play, you come from video games and stuff like that, but you have quite a lot of characters in there. How do you keep track of all of that?
Oh, well, I mean, I think this is also a role-playing thing, right? Where you are in these games and there are usually a lot of characters being thrown around. And so I have always been very used to sort of keeping track of them. That said, I have a wiki. Because, you know, that's helpful as to, and I have a lot of notebooks that I have built up over the years. I think I've got one right here. Whoops, you didn't hear that. I've got one right. Yeah, like, so I just have a lot of notebooks that I've built up over the years. with different notes on what I'm doing and how characters have shifted or evolved. Every once in a while, I get a character who kind of I don't want to say mutinies, but demands a larger part than I initially maybe have planned for. Tyann, I tell this story a lot, that there's a character in the first book named Tyenso, who was originally supposed to be a very minor part. Very, very minor part, literally was not supposed to leave the ship that she's introduced on. And that didn't work out that way. Yeah, she just kind of is like, no, how about instead you give me a much larger part. And I was like, well, clearly I have to do this. So and then that's happened a couple of times.
Yeah. Your characters seem to have a strong will.
Yeah.
Stronger than you sometimes.
Well, I mean, logically, right, I control everything my characters do. Understandable. But sometimes it seems that way, yeah.
Yeah. But you love them, right? You pamper them and
yeah. And sometimes I hate them. Not all the characters are good. There's a running joke that I have been trying to kill Talon for 5 books now. I've been trying to kill off that character. Every book that she's in, I've tried to kill her off, and every book she's in, something that I've done has turned out to be more important than killing her, and thus she has survived. It's hilarious to me.
And for those who might lose track of the characters, you have quite an appendix on your also with the royal houses and everything. You have a wonderful map also in, which reminds me of role playing, really.
Yeah. Well, because you have to have a map, right? You have to, that's a requirement.
Put it up quickly.
Yep. Yeah. So that I guess that's one of the instances where my art background comes in, because I did the map and I did all of the interior artwork.
You did? Wow.
Yeah. And and so the inside
again.
the inside joke to that, right, is that that the book, the framing device of the books is that they are they're diegetic, meaning they exist within the world of the book. The books themselves have an existence, and people talk about them. The first book begins with one of the characters basically writing to the person he is presenting this book to, and saying, I have compiled this. So technically speaking, he created the map. Which got fun in later books, because other people were compiling, like they weren't all compiled by that same person. So I had to try to change the art styles to have different people be. I'm a nerd. I'm such a nerd.
I think you're not alone. When you say you draw the map and you did the inside drawings and stuff like that, did you have a say in the cover? Could you choose the cover?
Yeah, I had a lot of input on the cover. I think that the people at Tor were, I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect they were a little wary, because they knew I used to be an art director. So they're like, she's going to have opinions. She's going to have a lot of opinions. But, it was never really an issue, because quite honestly, the people, the art director who worked on this and the artists just everybody involved in the process, they were so good. They were so good that it was just like, we're fine. Everything's fine. But I do remember when my editor came back to me and said, I'm thinking that we put a dragon on the first cover. And I came back to her and said, are you waiting for me to tell you no? Because I'm not going to tell you no.
Quite obviously not.
Having a book with a dragon on the cover is like a dream come true for me.
Yeah.
I was absolutely one of those kids that used to run around going, oh, it has a dragon on the cover. Yeah, well, I'll just have to take a look at that.
Mine.
So, yeah, exactly. And it cracks me up. I have seen people do that, like from across a convention center. They'd just be like, oh, book with a dragon on the cover, and have to come over.
I do buy some books because I like the cover. Sometimes I'm disappointed by the content. In this case, it wasn't the case.
I'm very, very happy to hear that.
Yeah. So it's your debut, and it has been a wide success in the English-speaking world, which is not, it's fantasy, it's your debut, it's everything. That wasn't, you didn't expect that, right?
No, not at all. I, like a lot of authors, I tried for a very long time to get published without success. I mean, that's a pretty familiar song and dance for many. You do the hustle, you try to get an agent, you try to do that whole thing. And I had given up. I was just like, this isn't going to happen. And a friend of mine, another writer, she messaged me and said, okay, I found your agent. So you just have to pitch this guy, query this guy, and he's your agent. I'm like, sweetie, no, come on. She's like, no, right now, I'll wait. You do it. And she was right. He was my agent. So, and then but not right away, like he did what they call an R&R, a revise and resubmit, where he's like, I really like this story, but I think that it needs to have a little bit of work done on it, and I'll coach you through it. But the feedback he gave me was really, really solid feedback. Yeah. So I didn't resent it at all. It was like, okay, yeah, we're going to make this better. And then he signed me, and we sold the book immediately, which doesn't happen. So, I mean, yeah, that just doesn't happen. So it was all very shocking, just shocking.
And we got a few questions from Facebook and YouTube. I'm going to read them to you. So Margaret, she writes, I've read only the first book and loved it. What was your inspiration for this series?
Oh gosh, there's been so many things that have been the inspiration for it. In fact, I don't think I've given the same answer twice to that question without ever lying. Like all of it's all been because there's just so many things that have fed into it. But I mean, we can start by the fact that I will admit that the main character Kieran was my character. So for a long running tabletop campaign, it's my character. But I think it was mostly just, I had decided I wanted to write a fantasy book. And so I kind of sat down and said, well, what story do I want to tell? And as I took the world and shaped it and developed it, there was a story that kind of started to come out of that. And it was this story of kind of almost a Cain and Abel tale of these two brothers and the relationship that they had. And ultimately that's where the series came from.
Okay, thank you. So then we have another question. First of all, I love A Chorus of Dragons. Who doesn't? I have read the first 2 German editions. You have a lot of very ambitious characters with a strong presence. who of them was annoying you the most? That's what
Annoying me the
Sandra is
most.
asking.
Oh, well, goodness. You know, annoying in like annoying as in problematic to write, or annoying. I mean, like, I don't like Darzan at all. Darzan is a horrible creature. You know, I really, really, writing him was going to a very dark place. So, because he's terrible, objectively just
Yeah.
terrible. So I have had somebody come up to me. It's like, I love Darzan. I'm like, what? And she had to explain that she just really appreciated how evil I'd made him. You know, there's definitely been cases where characters have been difficult to write for various reasons, and then, I come back and it's usually an instance where I realize I'm using the wrong approach to them. Actually, Thurvashar in the first book gave me some problems until I kind of figured out where he was coming from, and then it was all good. So, oh yeah, annoying in the way of acting differently than you have planned. I would absolutely say that Diane's so qualified as that. Because like I said, she was supposed to be a minor character that was just like, and then she ended up becoming one of the larger characters in the first book.
Not going to die.
No. She certainly didn't go away in the, with the ship in the beginning. And I've had that happen a couple of more times where there are characters. There's a character who briefly appears in book one, named Shaloran, who comes back in later books. And, she was definitely somebody who took on a much stronger role than I had originally planned for her. And sometimes you just have to go with it. Yeah, I would also say, trying to do this without spoilering too much, because I know that the German readers haven't gotten as far into it. So I'm just going to say Lady Maya had some issues where writing her was sometimes difficult.
I have another question. As you nearly finished the series, will you write another series? Are you already planning something in a new world, in another world?
I am actually already, I've already started on it's probably going to be a standalone, but definitely in a new world. And then I have some other books that actually are already written, but we might hold off on those for a little bit, just because they're not quite in the same vein. Want to stick with fantasy for a little bit. But yeah, no, absolutely writing more. And I'm not even discounting the idea that I might eventually write more on this world. There's a lot more story here to be had. It's a very large world. So
yeah, and there are a lot of stories which might be developed in one way or the other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. So, yeah, I definitely have more books planned, which my agent is happy to know about.
Great. We just talked about, we are not yet that far with the German version. And when we talked before, you said the book has been translated into 9 languages. Like when you talk about German translation, how does that work with the translator? Are you working together? Are there questions from them? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, wonderful, wonderful translator who basically would write me these lists of questions about nuances and things like that. You know, for example, just the Ruin of Kings doesn't translate perfectly into German, which is not a thing I had thought about, or you know, and so we had to kind of go back and forth a little bit to find something that properly conveyed the idea without, you know, I guess the direct translation of ruin is like a ruined castle, not
Yeah.
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 So so we had to go with something else. But it was really interesting to have that sort of back and forth where you're going over nuance, and trying to make sure that you're getting the right, you know, the right feeling with the translation. I was really impressed with the translator that they have working on my book.
And did they all ask that many questions, or what was that
No,
special?
no,
No,
no. The German one has absolutely been the best. Absolutely. You know, there's a couple of them out there where like I literally didn't even know what the cover was going to look like until I saw it posted on Instagram. So what can you do? I just, you know, cross my fingers and hope that those are translated well. But yeah, no, Germany has been the most involved and the most, you know, the most interested and really responsive and trying to make sure they get it right. So I've been very appreciative of that.
And sometimes it's really, really hard to translate titles and stuff like that, like cover titles.
Yeah.
I know
Well, just
that,
the whole thing. Like translators don't get enough credit. They don't get nearly enough credit, honestly.
Definitely not. So credit to all translators.
Yes, yes, very much so.
One funny thing in your book is that you are actually working with footnotes, which usually, you know, in academical scientific works are very serious things. And if you miss, you know, a dot or something like that, people are going to kill you. But you actually use them most of the time in a funny and hilarious way to comment as an outside comment on the story. Right. How did you come up with that?
Well, that came about because of the chronicler, the person who's pulling the book together, is this character named Thurvashar, and Thurvashar's he's an academic, so it seemed very natural that he would footnote, and it originally started off as sort of footnotes for world building or for accuracy, or, you know, the times where he would be like, okay, so, you know, I think at one point, I don't think it's there anymore, but I think in the original draft, I literally had a footnote on exchange rates between different currencies, you know, and that kind of very, you know, precise footnotes. But he has this very dry sense of humor, and so as it progressed, the footnotes started getting more and more sort of sarcastic and you know, more of his own opinion started to sneak into it, and I just decided to go with it, you know, like, yeah, let's because in theory, right, he wasn't doing this for a he wasn't doing this for a general audience. He was doing this for a very specific audience. So it made sense to me that he would be giving these sort of very personalized footnotes, you know, annotated comments directed towards this one reader, which without spoilering too much, there's some points in there because he is who he is, where he is effectively mansplaining events to someone who was there. And he doesn't even, he's not even stopping to think about the fact that maybe this person knows already exactly what happened here.
Mansplaining, okay. I see you have an opinion on that as well.
Well, I mean, I use mansplaining, but truthfully, it's just I've known people who will over explain it. the gender has no part of it. It's just they're going to over explain to everybody. And this idea of over explaining to somebody who actually knows more about the matter than you do, that's very Thermishar.
So one question I'm personally interested in, and I'm asking not about the book, but you have, like the subhead for the book is, what if you weren't the hero? What is for you personally a hero? How does a hero look? Or not look, but what does it present?
Well, I mean, that this comes into one of the things that I've always found really interesting about this idea of the chosen one or the hero in a lot of fantasy stories. Very often the hero ends up being somebody who is defending the kingdom, is protecting the kingdom. They're going to restore the monarchy, or they're going to defend Gondor from, the forces of evil that are at the gates. And there was always a part of me that was sitting there going, but what if the kingdom's terrible? What if the kingdom's a terrible, terrible place? Is the hero the person who protects that? Because it seems like maybe no, the hero, what is heroic in those circumstances, particularly what is heroic in those circumstances where, where any sort of revolution or rebellion in those conditions is unlikely to be peaceful or without loss of life. Who's a hero? So
that's not only in the book a good question to ask, I think.
Yeah. I think that we have an opportunity with fantasy to really interrogate some of these ideas, and I think we don't do it enough. We could do a better job.
It's probably a little bit with what the fairy tales did in the past, with the general truth that was shown behind the scenes, more or less, to educate the children about right and wrong, or about the circumstances. So
right. Yeah. And then you get older and you realize that it's more complicated than that.
Yeah. And then you have to write fantasy to explain the general truth. So we count on you.
Fortunately, I'm not the only person out there doing it, so it's all good. Yeah.
Okay, Jen, we are already again at the end. This was far too quick.
This just went by.
Yeah. I'd like to continue. I actually have 20 more questions, but we will have to do that another time. So I want to say thank you so much. This was really, really great. It was great to meet you. I hope next time maybe we can meet in person and I can get my signature in my book.
Yes, I would love that.
Yeah. Thank you for being so patient with us, with the problems in the beginning, and answering all our questions. This was great. This was one of my highlights. And
thank you.
I hope to see you soon again.
All right. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
You. Bye.